assume that was a yes. All right, so welcome to the special meeting of the Midcoast Community Council, Wednesday, September 20th. First thing to do is to have a call of the members present. And I want to just read something from Tim Fox that applies to some of us. He had written us, and I forwarded it to the council, that you 2 times per calendar year, you can exercise a just cause provision, which allows you to attend remotely and vote without any fancy footwork. There's also a 3-month emergency circumstances clause, which requires a vote at the beginning of the meeting to allow people using it to attend and vote. So my plan is to use, because I'll be out for a while, the emergency circumstances as I did last meeting. And once everybody has checked in, we'll call for a vote, Scott. Now we have Kimberly, do you want to use a just cause, emergency circumstances, or none of the above and not vote?
I think, I mean, technically, because I'm not there because I've had a migraine headache all day, and also the air quality is very bad, and I don't want to risk just making things worse. So it appears you have enough voting members that maybe this time I will not be a voting member.
Okay, that's your choice. We will still recognize you for comment as part of the council. Claire, what is your desire? Just cause, emergency circumstances? You're muted.
Muted, Claire.
Okay. My understanding is that there's also a provision for communicable diseases where you are allowed to attend remotely and vote. And I have a really bad cold or something. So I just don't want to breathe on people. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so you're citing you're present as a voting member. Okay, so that means we will have a quorum with Ann, Scott, and Dan. And so I would ask you to call the roll. All right, I would ask Scott to call the roll, and then I'll call for a vote on my situation.
Okay, Greg, I'm going to put you down.
I can't say I'm here yet because you haven't voted.
Oh, so we're going to vote first? All right, so.
No, you're going to vote after everybody checks in and you recognize that you have a quorum.
We can't vote on anything until there's been officially a quorum established.
So who should I ask who's here?
Everybody except
Greg?
Except Greg.
And Kimberly and Claire.
No, Claire, I think is.
Claire
counts.
Okay, all right, Dan. You're here.
Yes.
Okay, I'm here. We're gonna say Claire's here, remote and voting. Ann?
Here.
Okay, Gus, you're here.
Yeah.
Okay. And Kimberly is here and non-voting, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So
now I would like to call for a vote to allow me to participate under the emergency circumstances clause as a voting member.
okay. Dan?
Yes.
Yes, I'm a yes. Claire?
Yes.
Okay. Kimberly's not voting. Ann?
Yes.
Okay. And Gus?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have 4, and that's all we need, right?
Yes.
Well, you have 6 with me and Claire.
Yes. 6.
Right, but the vote, I'm just gonna
We
say
established the quorum with 5,
we still okay.
and then that added Greg in there.
So I say 5-0 pass for Greg then.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes, fine.
All right.
got it.
So let me move into the meeting then. This is a special meeting, so we do not have the usual government officials reports or public comment. There will be public comment allowed as we discuss the individual agenda items. The first agenda item is a review of our response to the Cypress Point draft EIR. And we have approximately a 60-page report which has gone through now 8 versions, and 3 letters of different versions of a letter of transmittal to allow us to send that report to planning and other parties. What I propose to do, I guess, is to start by going around the council and asking if you have framing comments. Then I would open it up for public comment. Then I would open it up for council discussion and decision-making. Kimberly, you wanted to ask an initial question?
I want to ask a question of process because we had discussed pulling the Montera Mountain topic tonight. Do we have to formally pull the topic?
I don't see a reason to pull it. I think it's fine for you to just give us an update on what you know and maybe
Yeah.
not do as much as you were thinking of doing, but I think the public would welcome an update on where we stand. So if that's okay, it's an informational item.
I mean, it would just be a really very short and brief. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thanks. All right, so back to the Cypress Point draft environmental impact report. Go around the table, the virtual table with the council, asking for your overall comment or framing comment on this agenda item and what you hope to accomplish. Dan, maybe start with you.
As far as the, you said 60 pages?
A little more probably, yeah.
7, yeah. So, last time this was discussed, I suggested that we are more succinct. By creating such an enormous document, it just creates a lot of work for council members to read through and to understand what we're putting out there, because the whole council is putting this out there, right? It will reflect on all of us. My thought is that it's pretty big. I'll not going to say that it's bad, but what are the odds of these people like really reading everything? So I'll just leave it at that for now.
I should have added one other introductory comment. The deadline for us to send this into Mike Schaller at Planning is the 25th of September, which is Monday, as I recall. All right, next, Scott.
So I think it represents what the community wants, especially the community that's close to it. And even though it's large, I think it should go. I would vote to send it. And also there was an article in the newspaper this morning, which says basically the same thing, right? In so many words. Right.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that we should like rework it at this point. I'm not saying that at all. I think we should send it.
Next around the table seems to be Gus.
Sure. Yeah, in terms of framing comments, I guess what I would say is 2 things. Number one, this council will go to the mat for the community on this issue. That's why you're seeing a 67-page document. We really went through and went point by point in that EIR to address all the weaknesses that this project clearly has. We will go to the mat for you on it, but I want everybody in the community to be emotionally prepared for what is most likely to happen next, which is they're going to build that thing. And the reason they're going to do that is because the choice to do it is a political choice. It's not a choice that's being made based on weighing a bunch of merits about the quality of the site and all that kind of stuff. It's a political choice to put it there. And the politics of the situation is Sacramento is pushing a policy of increasing density absolutely everywhere. For instance, right now they're working on a bill to override the Coastal Commission on housing projects. Like Cypress Point just represents the first of what will almost certainly be many to come. So until and unless the political dynamic in Sacramento changes, until there is a political price to be paid for pushing that kind of project over the wishes of the communities that they're going into, this kind of thing will not stop. And so I just want everybody to be emotionally prepared for that, because that is the most likely outcome of all this. Like, we'll go to the mat for you and we will submit this, and almost certainly it will be ignored. I just want everyone to be prepared for that.
And so they also said in the newspaper article that their decision is final.
Mhm. Yes.
Regardless of how you feel,
Mhm.
our decision is final.
Yep.
There'll be no appeal.
Nope.
Next around, is that it, Gus?
Yeah, that's it.
So, you
All right,
know,
next around the table is Ann.
So having put many hours into this, I think it is important to at least say your piece. Try to fight the good fight as best you can. And there's a lot of legitimate concerns. There are serious safety concerns that we have brought up, not only for the people in the community, but visitors, as well as the new residents. The likelihood that the firehouse will not be able to respond in the appropriate time is very likely. You know, when it's a life or death situation, it's really very serious. And when you have a firehouse in the middle of a residential neighborhood, it's something that needs to be considered. So I'm hoping that they will in fact consider that. Keep in mind that the DEIR was over 400, I think it was 432 pages. So for us to come up with 60 pages, it's not as much as you would think. So, but we really did try to be comprehensive. We have been told that each comment, each question will be replied to. So I hope that is the case. I think some alternatives were offered. That may be something that we have to look at in the future. And other than that, I think that the work speaks for itself, and we tried to do everything we could for the community.
All right, Kimberly, you wanted to add some comments?
Yeah, I have a few comments. First, I'd like to say that I agree with what Gus said. Unfortunately, that is the case, and I encourage the community to call and write our representatives and Governor Newsom to, you know, let him know how you feel about this, because I fear that Gus is right. This is only the first, and we probably in the coming years are going to see a lot more. That said, this draft EIR, maybe it is a foregone conclusion, but I think that it is an opportunity to improve the process and to improve the kind of development this ends up being, you know, if that is what happens. And in that spirit, I want to thank you all for the work that you've done. It's an incredible amount of stuff to go through and to construct a response to such a substantial EIR. That said, I'm concerned that the document is not ready for prime time yet. And so my question is, it seemed to me that there's still a lot of editing to do, unless I read the wrong document. How is that final editing going to happen? Because obviously the council is not going to be able to see that. And how will it then be sent on Monday? I also proposed edits to the cover letter, which I think Greg posted as a version 3. And I strongly feel that it needs to be more objective and less adversarial in tone. I think you're more likely to get someone to listen to what you have to say if it's a more objective tone as opposed to a more adversarial tone. So with that, I guess I'll just leave that question there. How do we propose to finalize this? Because I don't think this is final and ready to go.
I will speak to that when it's my turn. Claire?
I actually am much more impressed with the project as it's currently on our website than I was last week. A lot of work has been done. It's much more coherent. I think it's a very good effort to address the EIR. It takes each step of the EIR and comments and gives more evidence and more information, because the EIR was kind of scanty to begin with. And I think we actually did a pretty good job. And it's not going to be perfect. And I don't know if anybody's going to read it, but they're going to have to read enough to respond to us. I don't, I kind of, I'm not, this started before the current push from Sacramento to increase housing. This has a life of its own, but it's been caught up in the current wave. I don't know what newspaper it was. Scott, can you tell me?
It's that
Daily Journal.
Yeah, the Daily Journal.
And what happened? The supervisors said something about it, or what?
It was an article in the meeting,
Yeah.
the planning meeting.
Yes, there's an article about planning.
It was an article about the planning meeting, and they had a lot of quotes from the community in there. My take-home message from that article was the community would like to see the road work completed that supports this project before they break ground on the actual buildings themselves. The take-home message was, when the planning commission decides on what they will do and where and how, it's final and there'll be no appeal to this. Once they decide, that's what's going to happen. And I have 3 copies of the newspaper, and I'll save one for you in case you're interested.
Is that true that there is no appeal of any of this at this point?
Is that what
And that was
Yes.
the tenor of the article. Like I can't speak to whether that's actually true or not, but I assume it is.
I would assume it isn't, but it might be. I thought it was
It-
appealable to the
that's
Coastal
true.
Commission, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I
Um,
was there. It's true. It's not appealable to the Coastal Commission.
Right, not appealable to the Coastal Commission.
Okay. Well, I think at this point that the work that's been done is worthy work. I'm hoping that we can put something together and at least say what we see and hopefully influence some of what happens, and not just with this, but for the future. So that's what I'd like to see, us reach some sort of an agreement about how we're going to send it and get it over with and send it in. That's my expectation for tonight.
Excuse me, Greg, I just want to have it on the record. One of the community members said that it is appealable to the Board of Supervisors.
I thought so too.
So
Okay.
but a lot of things were said, it's done. So I just want to let everybody know that, this is typical tactics of government to say, hey, this is done, final, just go home. We don't want to listen to you anymore. Just relax. So this is very typical. So we should not really buy into this article. We should not be surprised that they're telling us that it's done. So don't accept that, is my advice. I don't think it'd be good practice.
Okay. But let me start off by saying thank you. We got contributions, from just about everybody on this, including, I lost count of how many community members sent in stuff that was well written, valuable photographs, maps, a lot of those comments without listing the names of the residents who contributed them. But a lot of those comments are actually in the text of the article as sort of testimony of what we're concerned about. I lost track of how many 2:30 a.m. emails I got from Gus and Ann. You know, and it was tough because, you know, those people are still working and have jobs and stuff like that. I couldn't sleep well for 2 weeks. I hope to be able to sleep tonight. The draft EIR was 432 pages, but the rest of the supporting material and appendices took it over 1,000. And then in my dialogues with Mike Schaller, he pointed me to other web pages containing more detailed studies that hadn't been mentioned that added to that total. So I don't know how much stuff I looked at. It was really overwhelming. I view it as our job to both be fact and evidence-based, but also to reflect the sentiment of the community. And so that's what I think we've tried to do here. As far as Dan's comment about don't give up, I do think that the council can consider at another date what kind of campaign we want to undertake to influence whoever we want to influence. Kimberly is right about the cleanup. And I will paste into chat and read out loud my thought on a motion to address this, because even though the version that was posted a half hour before the meeting is cleaned up more than you may have seen, Kimberly, there's still much work to be done. So here is my thought on a motion. Basically, I think the council should vote to approve the letter of transmittal as amended, whichever version we agree on tonight, and then to authorize an ad hoc group of Greg and Ann to complete the final formatting of the report. We don't have a table of contents. We don't have a cover page. We don't have captions on the images. There may be inconsistencies in our numberings of the questions. You can imagine the number of things that we've rushed to put together. You know, the whole spacing and formatting thing needs to be worked on. And I would suggest we be empowered to do that with an audit by Claire Toutant, who can ensure that we don't change anything material as we clean and tidy up the report. So that will be the nature of the motion I would hope to see after we have public comment and after we have further council discussion. Okay. Again, unfortunately, we have a deadline of Monday. I believe, I can't speak for Ann, but I can put time in on this tomorrow. I have 4 other meetings. And I would hope we have cleaned it up enough that we're close and that we can get something to Claire by the end of day Thursday, and that she would have a chance to look it over on Friday, and that we can send it out by the, you know, close of Friday. Even if it's in the evening, it's still ahead of a Monday deadline. I would also point out one other thing that I believe I put into the letter, which is I want to send this to the other agency stakeholders in our area, because we are making representations about things that could affect them, right? For instance, there's mention of the need for more wet weather storage in the Granada area to handle the sewer overflows. Okay, there's a suggestion, one of the alternatives could be housing for workers at the schools in Cabrillo. And they also are pursuing something else on their own. There's some representations about things with respect to the sewer plant in Montera. So I propose to send this to all those people. And then if and when they confirm or correct or augment our observations, we as a council can publish an amended version of this response that includes whatever we might have gotten wrong or missed. I don't know what county planning will say about that, but I do think it's worthwhile hearing from the other agencies what they think as well. So that's my proposal for a process. Send it out, include them, and then, you know, I'll be happy to follow up with those other agencies and bring back to the council anything else we need to do. So before I open it up for public comment, Kimberly, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I looked at it again, and this is a different version than the one I looked at. So I am a little more comfortable with the fact that this is a little more cleaned up than what I saw before.
Yeah, I'm afraid you saw efforts that might have been 4:30 in the morning.
All right, thank you.
Okay, All right, so now I want to open it up for public comment, and then we'll return to the council later for what we want to do about the letter and taking votes. Sid Young, I see. Well, somebody's excited. Let me figure out who that is and mute
Can you,
them.
can you mute,
That might have been Lynn. Sid Young, you raised your hand. We'd like to
Yes.
entertain your comment.
Thank you. And it was Lynn making the noise because the yellow square went around his name. First of all, Greg, I'm sorry if you've been sick, but you did miss last night's meeting, and I don't know. It seems like the transportation plan is really half-baked at the county, so we may still have an out. And I do appreciate so much all the effort that went into writing this letter and all the public that contributed, as well as the fact that most people aren't going to write letters. So it's better to put in a very detailed letter, saying it is from the community, a mutual effort, because it's important since not everyone else will be so detailed. And, if they don't read it, that's the problem. That is a big problem because this is just the draft EIR. I understand there is an EIR still to come before they put it to the Board of Supervisors. But first, they have to answer any questions raised in the final EIR, I believe. So I'm glad that you wrote it up, and we should send it in, even if it's lengthy. Thank you for everybody for your hard work.
Okay, I cannot see all the audience. Are there people in the audience there? Dan, could you tell me whether there's public who raised their hand? I see somebody there. Is that Len?
yeah, no, we have a member of the community here that'd like to comment. You ready to comment now? Yes? So.
Go to the microphone, please.
Okay.
So Carl May, Moss Beach, just a few old guy comments. One, and I have been involved in things here since 1974, so have a little perspective. First, I've been very pleased over the months with the sort of level of intelligence and involvement on the part of this particular MCC. To be as energetic and dedicated as you are for no pay whatsoever is remarkable. And I think it's remarkable that you have come up with some of these lengthy reports and so forth. On the matter of not giving up, my involvement in coast-side environmental matters really started with the Devil Slide controversy. And McNee Ranch State Park had just been created in 1985. I started extending my running out there. And that very year, Caltrans illegally graded almost 2 miles of pioneer roads that without permits, coastal development permits or anything else, to drilling sites for the proposed bypass, which had not been approved. And of course, as a nature lover and all that, I got a little upset about this and sort of got deeply involved, became a member of CPR1, which was our local group, which was one of the 3 major groups that fought the bypass for decades. And it went on into lawsuits. One thing that's done with all of these comments and so forth that go in, even though the politics are against us, even though they're going to vote the way they're going to vote, already they know how they're going to vote. All of this goes into a record. And Midcoast Eco, although we're not a powerful bunch or anything like that, and I let them sort of be my major approach to this particular item, Midcoast Eco is going to sue for whatever they can on this. And I make contributions to them to try to help out in this lawsuit effort. All of these comments and so forth become part of the record. When you file a lawsuit on something, as I hope we will have room to do on this thing, you go to that record. As a matter of fact, when you file a lawsuit, you have to buy the record, most of which you created. And with Devil Slide stuff, I think it was like $12,000 or $13,000 we had to pay to buy the record of all that went in there. And that goes into all the hearings and comments, written comments on EIRs, draft EIRs, and so forth. All of this then becomes material for a potential lawsuit. So to try to hold up maybe a possibility of Midcoast Eco being able to go forward with this, I'd say go ahead and file what you got to file. That can become grist for the mill later on. With the Devil's Slide situation, we held off Caltrans, which had a fix-in from the state level right on down to our local level with real estate people here locally. We held them off for over 20 years. Finally, we had a judge that gave us some partial victories. Finally, Caltrans and the state and the county, San Mateo County, had overcome all of the things that we put in the way in this lawsuit. That got up to the mid-90s, which then all of the groups involved and many local people stuck, because this was approved, the bypass was approved in the LCP. We went off and did a county initiative called Measure T. And this was a vote by the entire county to change the local coastal plan. It moved the bypass from the top of the priorities to the very bottom of the list. And what got done as a result of that Measure T was a tunnel, which I'm not entirely happy about, but because there were other options. But nonetheless, that just shows that every now and then on something you can win, or at least get a partial victory that's better than what's been proposed. I could go on through a number of things. This thing affects the neighborhood where I live. People who with these hypothetical people who would live there, and nobody's living there now. These are hypothetical people who would somehow be benefited by this. There are real people living in this place right now who will clearly be harmed in some ways by this project. That has not been taken into account by any of our political leaders. It's never taken into account people like Scott Wiener, Senator Scott Wiener, who's pushing all of these urban development, growth mania things on this, and has finally gotten them through in the state of California, signed off by Newsom, by the way. That all of that leads up to the point that we should not let the harm to people who live in this place go unrecognized. It'll be harm to those of us in the neighborhood who are going to be harmed. I see Ann nodding because she's in the neighborhood. But it'll also be harm to coastsiders in general, who must travel the highway every day. And it'll provide harm to our coastal environment. Not even brought up in all of this with the very disappointing highway sort of promotional meeting we went to last night. Not even brought up in all of that is the fact that Highway 1 is going to become jammed up. And it's jammed up right now by what? Too many cars. And when you add population, you'll add more cars. Highway 1 is going to be a clog like it is at Coronado and El Granada. Highway 1 is going to be a clog like it is at the intersection in Pacifica and so forth. That affects access to the coast. And a big part of the Coastal Act is about access to the coastline in the coastal zone. The whole thing got started by access at Sea Ranch up north in Malibu down south. Those were the initial sparks that set off the whole Proposition 20, which then it ended up in the Coastal Act 4 years later. So there's a great deal of harm that can be done by overloading any place, overpopulating any place. And that needs to be recognized. I don't think that's been emphasized nearly enough. Kimberly's such a nice person. She wants us to be objective. But I think when you get a proposal like this that says something cannot be mitigated, but the benefits are so overwhelming that we should not require mitigations. That's PR. That's baloney. These are hypothetical people. Real people who live here will be harmed. And so that's sort of a bunch of philosophy for you to mull around. But please don't give up on this because of the potential things that can happen down the line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carl, thank you. I think you'd be pleased to see that most of your comments are actually addressed and reinforced in the document, but you brought up one, and I will note this for the council to discuss later. I don't think we stressed the fact that the clogged roads are going to hamper access by visitors. We didn't have that in there. So we could discuss as a council adding a paragraph, not necessarily into the letter, but into the findings we're putting in on the section on transportation. So let's make a note of that. Are there other people in person there who want to speak before I go back to calling on the virtual audience?
No.
Okay, thank you. Burnett Silveria.
Yes, after the last meeting, I actually went online and pulled some copies of some responses to EIRs. And the one that I thought was the most persuasive to me in reviewing it, it might be something you want to consider. It's where they laid out the concern or the question and then supported it rather than get it. And that helped the reader to focus on what the concern was in the paragraphs or the paragraph that followed the question or the concern. Here, you're kind of doing it opposite. You're putting the questions at the end after you sort of gave a description. As a formatting concern, you might think about putting the questions in advance of and then justify why you're making those questions, which you have. It's just the order. It wouldn't take a lot of rewrite, just something to think about. I thought those were the ones where I know what their concern is. Okay, here's why they're justifying. This is why they're questioning it. And then I was zeroed in rather than reading it and then go, oh, okay, this is why they're doing it, kind of doing it backwards. You may want to consider that. Just having read a few of them, that's the one that jumped out at me that was the most persuasive. My 2 cents.
Are you available to type until dawn?
I'm in copy and paste until dawn because it looks like basically that's what you would do. The questions are behind your justification. So it just require to move the questions to before the justification or the support rather than being at the end. It's I know you guys done a lot of work. It looks great, but just as a persuasive document, something to maybe think about.
I think that's actually great.
Burnett, thank you for forwarding to us that template guideline for responding to EIRs. I actually had excerpts from that at the head of this document for all of us to be reading as we were authoring the sections. Pulled them out just recently, so that hopefully did guide us in what we were doing. Dolores Silva, your hand is raised.
Hello. Wow, this is quite a document, and I'm very happy to see that so many people have contributed. But I did want to, just to get to the point, Carl May mentioned Midcoast Eco. I want to bring you up to speed a little bit on that. When we sued back, what was it, like 2 years ago almost, to oppose the zoning change, when we went to court, we told the judge, and we have it in our documents, that we were concerned that by approving the zoning change without the required environmental impact reviews that were that should have been considered for the cumulative impacts, we were concerned that when it came back around, if they allowed the county to wait until this process, that it might never go to the Coastal Commission again, because the Coastal Commission had signed off on this PUD. And that's what we've got. So we are still in the lawsuit. The judge ruled against us because he accepted the county's view that they would be doing the environmental impact at this time. And so they deferred to that and said, okay, it's not, they didn't address our legal points about why it should have been done earlier. They said, okay, it's enough that they're going to do it soon. Well, now we see that it's not appealable to the Coastal Commission, but the lawsuit isn't over. Our appeal is due by the 30th. We will be filing it in the next, probably early next week. And as this DEIR came out late, or recently, our attorney is in the midst of reviewing both that and the appeal. So we'll see how that goes, but it'll take months before we know what the outcome of the appeal is. But we do have that active. We have appealed the decision to accept the zoning change that, in doing so, accepted the PUD as described in this detail, because they had to describe the entire project. And we'll see how that goes. But it could be that we could potentially even join the CDP into that. We'll see. I don't know exactly what our legal strategy will be, but it is in the process. We're still working on it. And we are still nonetheless addressing this DEIR and what we think of it. And I did want to mention a couple of things that really aggravated me when I read this DEIR. You know, some of us that do live in the neighborhood, and I'm speaking of us, those on Carlos Street, and right behind that is Stetson Street, and even up into Kelmore and here on Sierra. I mean, they're talking about toxic air impacts that they say during construction that the cancer risk will be elevated above the threshold of significance during that 18-month construction term. However, because of our low population, this is less than significant. So nothing needs to be done. They say things like that really just kind of really make your blood boil. But overall, I don't see how it won't destroy our neighborhood. I'm really concerned about it. I mean, once it's done, it's done. You can't go back. So I hope that they can find a way to make it more palatable. I mean, it doesn't have to be this large. It doesn't have to be, it could be like for senior housing that would be less impactful to the traffic. It could be a combination of some housing and, say, a community center. I don't know. And there's better locations for housing because we're too far from services. So I do hope that the county will hear us instead of being driven by their quotas. I'm afraid that they are being driven by their quotas. And that's like too bad for us, but it's not right. And thank you for putting this much effort in it. I know it's been a lot and we're still doing our efforts as well. So thank you. And if there's anything that I can help with, please let me know.
Thank you, Dolores. Do we have any other public comment on this matter before we turn back to the council for making decisions? Kimberly Williams, you're a council member, so I'm looking for public comment.
You raise your hands, you
Okay.
click on the reactions, and that's how you access to raise your hand to make a comment.
Yeah,
There-
thanks for that, Dan. At the bottom of the menu, there's a reactions, bottom of the screen, and then you click on that and it pops up a menu that says raise hand. I think we should check the chat. We have thanks. Okay. So nobody there wanting to make a comment. All right. So let's go around the table again and discuss what the council wants to do. You heard my proposal that we vote on a letter and an authorization for a cleanup committee to fix the body of the report. Since Kimberly has her hand raised, we'll start with you.
I just wanted to make a comment separately, though. Something Carl and Dolores both said made me think of something that I think is also an important point. Over the past week, I've met two individuals who are in danger of losing their homes on the coast side and are living in conditions that, you know, because they're renting out the majority of their home to someone so that they can keep their homes, was very disturbing to me. And I think we also need to communicate to the county and to Sacramento that these initiatives that they're pushing do nothing for these people who are in these terrible positions, who need affordable housing. This kind of development is not going to help them. And most of these people are elderly. So I was very distressed by this in the sense that we're trying to get more affordable housing. This development, or any development, does nothing to help the people who need to preserve their homes that they already have, who are not going to be able even to get into these housing developments if they lose their own homes. So I think that's something to consider. I also, there was one other point I wanted to make. Carl's point about access to the coast, I do think that's very important, and I should have thought of it myself. It should be in there. That's a very important point to add. So I'll leave it there.
Okay. I should just note that we mentioned in this document that there are some increased costs that existing residents will have to bear as a result of this development. I did not put into this document the complete financial dynamics, which I can explain at length. It will be a major cost to ratepayers, but we didn't put that in. That involves much financial theory. Okay, so Kimberly has spoken. Next council member, let's, since we're going virtually, Claire, do you want to make any comments on the path forward right now? Public comments closed.
Okay, just so I understand what we're doing, the proposal is that we come up with a more or less finalized cover letter tonight, and that the bulk of the report will be spruced up, and then I will oversee that or audit it or something. But we're not going to deal with the bulk of the report tonight. We're just going to deal with the cover letter. Is that correct?
Well, that's up to the council. I'm merely proposing that. If the council wants to dive into details of the report, I can put it up on the screen and we can go through it section by section. But right now, that is the proposal. And I can see a refinement of that coming to the effect that we vote to allow us to add a paragraph into the response to talk about the restrictions on visitor access that will be created by the extra traffic congestion. And I'd be happy to author that paragraph. I wouldn't put it in the cover letter because we're not dealing with all the details in the cover letter, but I would put it into the transportation section of the report. So if
I would
the council,
suggest in the interest of time that we do make a list of things that people propose should be added or maybe taken out of the existing report, but not make it a focus of what we're doing tonight, and mostly focus on getting a letter that people can agree on, since that's what we're actually, I think, voting on, if that makes sense.
okay. Yeah, it sure does. All right, so we've covered Claire and Kimberly, going around the table, starting with Dan. Your thoughts on my suggestion about editing the letter and voting to transmit it and so forth. Anything you want to bring up now that we've heard public comment and so forth.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I thank you, Greg, everybody that's put a lot of hours into this. You know, I think it is very important that this is addressed and sent. So I want to make very clear that, you know, thank you for all. I know it was a lot of work. Yes, I think, you know, what, you know, there's one minor thing that I wanted to kind of add. It's just to complete the Dark Sky International, so that on the last page. But yes, I think it should be sent out. That's
Did the microphone stop?
no,
I
that's
think Dan's
it.
done.
Done.
Okay, Dan, if you take a look at the dark sky section, what you sent was the starting point for a section that probably tripled in size since you drafted it. So we have a considerable amount added.
Yeah, it's just that there are no the term dark sky is it has been very loosely used. There's no real standards. There's no this company can say it's dark sky compliant, that company can say, but to say that it's Dark Sky International fixtures, Dark Sky International seal of approval actually has some meat. There's actually some real you know, recommendations there that are, you know, and Dark Sky International is the global you know, recognized authority. Okay, so I just wanted to be clear, the last page just so it's clearly, it doesn't say just Dark Sky General, it says Dark Sky International.
Okay, I'll take that as a cleanup.
For 12 of the last page, page 67.
Okay. I will take that as a cleanup assignment. Scott, you have any comments?
I'm prepared to vote right now. I'm ready to vote on it.
Well, we got to go through the letters. We have significant issues in the letters to discuss. So hold your horses. Thank you for your initiative. Gus,
I'm
did you
prepared to
wanna-
vote as soon as you say it's time.
Okay. I would like some sleep too, but first let's go through the process.
The
Gus?
clock's ticking. Don't worry about these guys.
I'm fine with all the process things that that you've proposed. Let's pick a letter. Let's authorize the extra paragraph to be added. So on. All that sounds good to me. If I could just have 30 seconds of soapbox to respond to something that Kimberly said, which you know, the state spends billions and billions and billions every year on homelessness. But if you're an elderly person who's in danger of losing your house, there are like no programs to help you. You know, but if you'll just advise those two people, I guess, to like start a heroin habit and like pitch a tent on the street, then there will be a million programs that they will suddenly have access to. And it drives me bananas that that's the way the state prioritizes who to help and how many resources to throw at who they're helping. But that's, again, something that will not change until the politics in Sacramento change. So anyway, okay, I'm off the soapbox.
All right, Gus, I would say while we're talking to you, there was one sentence in a section that you drafted that I couldn't quite figure out. So I would like, as part of our cleanup act, to send you the snippet and ask you to explain what that is, and then we'll reword it to make sense, okay? I think it was probably a cut and paste problem.
Okay.
All right, Anne.
Where do I start? But well, actually, I'm very happy with the document. I think just cleaning it up is great. The main thing I want to make sure is as it goes through its edit, that it does not change what is said. If we just, perhaps if there's maybe some word refinement necessary, that would be great, but I would like to keep it as close to what we have as possible. And then just like Kimberly said, I know many, many people trying to hang on to their house. This is something that is a very big problem, and why I have been pushing for senior housing for a long time. I have been going to the Board of Supervisors for years, begging for senior housing because we just don't have it. And we don't have any assisted living. And there's so much that we need on the coast. And like I said, I've been begging. If you look at the census data for Moss Beach, there are 57 families aged 65 and older living below the poverty line. 57. We could put 57 families in those 70 units today. They are in need of this housing, and the support for our senior citizens just doesn't exist. And I think it's a disgrace. We should not discard people by age. And I think it's just a horrible thing that we have no money and no push by the county to do anything. However, that can change, and it changes with our voices, and it changes with our votes. I mean, we have to let them know they're going to be on the hook. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well,
But, as far as the letter, I guess if there's any way we could please put the letter, each one up, so that we could go through them, that would be really helpful.
we will do that as soon as we finish the council comment. We'll go through the letters.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, thank you very much.
So I don't mean to pile on, but I certainly want to endorse not throwing away old people. I'm very much in favor of that. I asked Harvey a question at the last meeting. You may recall Half Moon Bay passed an ordinance to try and restrict the Airbnbs and short-term rentals. And I asked him a hypothetical question about a single mother with a special needs child who lost her job and had to Airbnb the house, and would that be something that would be permitted? And he said it would not, because it would exceed the number of days requirement. Well, that was not a hypothetical. That's a real situation I'm aware of here in the neighborhood. And I get the sense that there are other people who also are keeping their homes by using short-term rentals to augment it. I would not be surprised if a lot of the ADUs that are being built, either the owner moves into them while they rent or vice versa. And I did ask the question in this document what controls they had, not only for making sure that the people who moved in were like locals benefiting, but also to prevent short-term rentals. I'm really curious to see how that response will go down. All right, well, with that, I think we've covered all the council members. And
Greg, can I have one more? Greg,
go ahead.
That's just real quick. Yeah, one thing that I kind of recently was thinking about is that this is going to be a 100% rental situation, and the majority of the homes are occupied home. Well, I don't know what this is, but the thing is with these big projects, over time, they get run down. They have leaks, certain mold intrusion could be, and because it's not going to be owned by the inhabitants, historically the rental landlord just kind of puts stuff off. So there's a strong potential for the property to kind of run down over years. And in adding to this is, the developers are getting subsidies in their pocket, big time over this. And it's just something that I think should be emphasized. They're going to be
they're getting 25 million off the bat. And then investors in this project will be eligible for a 9% real estate investment tax credit.
Right. Right. And, it's possible that some of these investors are, BlackRock related, what's the other big housing, LLC. But,
Well, I took a look at some of the Mid-Penn offering memoranda on their other affordable housing complexes, and there's one in San Francisco. And it's a combination of wealthy individuals who can use the 9% investment tax credit, and corporations. They even offer tax exempt bonds as part of the financing because the corporations like tax exempt bonds. So, this industry is what's called the real estate syndication industry. It's been around for over 50 years. And I went to school with a guy who made at least $10 million in this business. So, yeah, you're right.
Okay. Yeah, I'd really, well, there's, buildings need special attention in this, environment. And if they're not kept up, they will start to mold, they will look crappy, the mold, and, there's no incentive for them to, it's for profit, right? It's for profit. So,
It's not.
well, the investors
It's a
are in it for the profit.
It's a nonprofit organization. Okay. But what that means is it's a pass-through profit organization. The profits are given to the investors above and beyond what Mid-Penn chooses to pay itself and its investors.
Okay. And to the builders.
Okay, so what I propose to do now, Kimberly, I wrote an obviously fabulous letter, nuanced, poignant, very persuasive. And then I received some objections from Ann Rothman, who chose to edit the letter. And so what I propose to do is to put up Ann's version of the letter and have her explain where it differs from mine, because frankly, I don't know. And then after she explains what she's trying to accomplish, we'll turn to Kimberly. We'll put up her letter and have her explain what she is doing with that. All right. So I hope you can see this letter. Do I need to make it any larger?
Yes, please, for me. My old lady eyes. Thank you.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. Where did you make the changes and why?
So let's see, everything I think was the same in the first paragraph and last paragraph. It's only the section that said, however, we recognize the California RENA and county imperatives to add housing, which benefits the builders. Oh, no, I didn't write that.
I think you put the underline thing in there. The underline, most importantly. Did you do that or did I?
No, you did. This is not my letter. But I was gonna say, that's your letter, I think.
This is your letter, dear. I'm pretty sure. What should I be looking for?
I'd say dear.
What my objection to your part was the sections that, and I'm pretty sure I changed this, so I really am gonna look back because I did.
All right, well, let me try another share screen. Don't give up. I'm easily confused. Here is another letter. Okay, maybe this is yours.
That's mine. That is my letter.
Okay.
I wanted the
What did you change?
What I changed is I wanted it worded in a way that did not give prerequisites to this project, and I did not want to give support to the project in any way. I don't want an out. I don't want to say, well, if you do this, then it's okay, because it's not. So that's, I think the main gist of it was that I tried to express the future threat, as I put in there, to residents of the proposed housing as well as the surrounding neighborhood. And I think I described in that a little bit better about the fire station, how that can affect everyone, that they will no longer have a timely response. There's also standards that the county and state set for time for response, and they will not be able to meet that in all likelihood. And I basically put the message that people's lives are more important than numbers. There are alternatives to this project that should be explored further. And that's where I wanted to leave that for the rest of our report to kind of express what those, alternatives would be. And then I
Okay, so
left in most of what your letter was. The only exception was the parts that basically gave them an out, that said, well, if you do this, then we'll support you, because we don't support them. I feel, I'm speaking for myself, but I don't believe we support what they are trying to build. And I think way too often I've participated in these meetings long before becoming a member. And every time I always see it get wishy-washy right before the letter gets written. And they're always worried about, oh, we're going to make somebody upset. Well, I say, who the hell cares? I mean, this is people's lives. Just like Carl said, people's lives are at stake here. And we're talking more than just the residents. We're talking about visitors. We're talking about a lot of people that will be affected if our fire and police cannot get to where they need to go in an appropriate amount of time. People can die. This is serious. And I just don't think we should try to give them any out. And I don't think you have to be nice about it. I think that it's time to actually put a firm foot down and say, no, we don't want it. And so I think I actually was nice, but I think that I just don't want to give them any out by saying, well, here's some prerequisites. If you meet them, then we're okay, because I don't think that's true.
So let me summarize. Let me summarize. Whereas I had talked about potential mitigations and so forth, you don't want to mention the possibility that this project could go ahead at all with any mitigations. So you took that out. And then you stressed the emergency responders in the fire station. Those are the changes, and it's all in this paragraph that begins, however.
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to turn to Kimberly's letter. Give me a second here. Okay, I'm going to blow it up. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Okay, so I wish I had seen Anne's version. I did not. I agree with what Anne says, because I had that thought when I suggested these edits, but I left it in because I thought that's what you all wanted. But I also agree with Anne that we shouldn't give them that out. So I'll leave that to you all to decide. But essentially, I made substantial changes. I think the intent and what you were trying to say is still there, but I tried to make it a little more within the, for instance, the intro paragraph that thanks them for the opportunity is just a routine thing, and it recognizes that we're submitting attached comments for review and response. The second paragraph, I think it still says the same thing, but I just sort of shortened it and tried to make it more clear. The third paragraph that Anne mentioned, I also tried to do the same thing, but I changed the part about Rena because I don't think that really added anything. I think what we want them to know is that we recognize the need for and are supportive of more affordable housing, but we just don't support this particular project, and to just be straightforward about saying that, to be less wordy and be more upfront. So in that paragraph, I'm totally comfortable with Anne's request not to give them the out, to say that, I guess that's the underlined part, that if you do this, then we're okay with it. We're not. So maybe just to make that clear, that's not to put that in and say that we're not okay with it. And then the last part, or the next paragraph where it says MCC also has concerns that Midpin's track record. I think that's what you were getting at, Greg, in your paragraph. As we discussed last time, I think Moon Ridge and Moss Beach are apples and oranges. So I altered that paragraph to make it more about their lack of responsibility and oversight for that development, as opposed to directly comparing the flooding and that, because I don't think there is a direct comparison to a particular issues. So that's why I changed that sentence. And then similar with the last two paragraphs. One thing I would note is that you mentioned sending it by link instead of in an email because of the large size. I think that they have to receive it by email, and then you can include the link, but I would not send it by email, just even though it's a large document, because I'm not sure they'll accept it. So I would encourage us to send it as a large document and provide the link if they so choose to use the link instead. And that's all I have to say.
That's an interesting procedure point. Why don't I clarify that with shaller? Since this is going to go to a whole bunch of local agencies, what I would suggest as a compromise is to send it with a link as it is, and separately, if Shaller insists that I respond with a full email copy of 28 megabytes, I will send it the whole thing.
You have to send it all together, or else you risk it not being in the public record. That's my understanding. So if you don't do that, it's very possible that they'll include the introduction, the letter, but they won't include the full document. And you want the full document. That's the most important part. Is there a reason why you don't want to send the full?
I'm not sure it will transmit from my email, but how about this? Suppose we send whatever letter we agree on to Shaller and include the full 28 megabyte file. But everybody else who's addressed, we send only the link with the letter so that they don't have a 28 megabyte email in their box. Is that okay?
If you want to handle it separately like that, sure, but you're going to have to note in your email, that I don't see how you can do that. You're either copying all of them in the email or you're not. So it would mean that you would take the CCs off, or you would note in the CCC that you're separately sending it to all of these people.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
I think you can do that, but I still think there are some people who have to be CC'd. For instance, the supervisor. So for instance, Steve Monowitz, Ray Mueller, I think those you have to copy with the full document.
And the planning department as well, right?
And planning and building, that's the senior planner. But for the others, the sheriff, CAL FIRE, school district, SAM, that you could note that you're sending to those folks separately.
All right, we'll change the paragraph down here that says, we will share copies of our formal comments with all affected local agencies in a similar email, but without the file.
Can I make a quick suggestion? I was just wondering if I would be happy to print it out and send it express mail in a paper envelope to Mike Schaller, so it gets on record. But then could you get it to be posted on the Midcoast Community Council and send them a link for that?
So I was going to suggest that also.
Okay.
But have them sign for this document. Have it, someone has to say, yeah, I got this. And then it will meet that requirement of being put into the record. They'd have a hard copy of it along with emailing it. Yeah. But if you have any concerns, send a hard copy to who you consider the most important person to receive this.
But again, you're going to have to send it so that it arrives within the deadline.
The 25th.
Yeah, just FedEx it, print it and FedEx it with signature.
I don't know about you, but I haven't been able to rely on FedEx in that way lately. So
you could drive it over there too,
I
Probably
can,
not
I
gonna
can do that. If you print it, I'll drive it over. I'm okay with that. I don't know how to do
Sid, are
that.
you really willing to print this whole thing out?
We're talking 62 pages, right?
I think it's 68, but who's
Well, I'll go
counting?
up to 100 just and and drive and give it to Scott to drive over there.
All right. So
Let me
now
know
you
when.
won't get this. You won't get this until sometime on Friday after we reformat it and Claire approves the changes, right?
But it needs to be there
And
on
we-
Monday, correct?
Correct. So you'd have to
Okay.
print it out and you and Scott would have to coordinate and Scott would have to drive over there.
Okay.
I still am going to send him an email, but
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to drop off a hard copy. That's a great idea.
I think you should
honestly-
also, never mind.
I don't think 60 pages is that much. I regularly deal with documents that are several hundred pages long, and so do they. So, if somebody doesn't want to download the document, they don't have to.
All right. I'm taking notes. Sid hard copy, Scott drive.
And so I
Um,
will, I'll make sure I have the person you want it sent to, their address. And I don't know how to get them to sign for it, but I will try to think of something.
I don't know if that's essential.
Witness.
What do you think?
Or maybe just have, I guess if you just had a piece of paper that said, you're.
Received by.
And
served.
see, and then they can write their name, ask them to print and sign their name and the date.
Okay.
It's like a transmittal document or transmittal form.
Yeah, I would think that would satisfy.
All right. So I'm just scanning through what I had written. And Kimberly, I don't remember seeing in your version that you included a space for the link.
No, I just referenced it because I don't think that you need to. I mean, you can insert it there. You don't have to put it like that, but it's implied.
So what I think I'm hearing here is that we take Ann's second paragraph. I got to fix a typo right here where there's no period.
Okay.
And we take, I'm going to propose we take Ann's second paragraph. Okay.
With the exception of the first sentence.
Okay, let me go back to yours, Kimberly.
At least that's my suggestion.
Well, I'm honoring your suggestion here. I'm going to go back to the share screen again. Okay. So what are we replacing in your draft with Ann's?
I think you're on the wrong
words?
paragraph. It's the next one, right? It says, while the MCC recognizes the need, that's the paragraph we're talking about.
Okay.
Is that
So we
correct,
would
Ann?
replace. Let me paste into the chat just for fun, if I can do that. Okay, I pasted it into the chat, Ann's version of that paragraph. And we're going to take your paragraph that I'm flagging here, Kimberly, and we're removing that.
So my suggestion is to keep the first sentence to replace that Rena sentence. And then the
Okay,
rest
so
of
this
it would be Ann's
first-
paragraph.
Say, I don't like that first sentence
Oh, you
because I
don't?
hear this at every meeting and they hear it at every meeting. We're for affordable housing, but we don't want it here. That is the line that you hear over and over and over. And I feel it's very insincere sometimes. You know, people, they say that and it's taken with a grain of salt. I feel like if, rather than say something like that, even if you are, and you may very well be in support, it's true. But I think here, I like the part about putting in Rena because it lets them know, we know what you're doing. You know, this is a requirement you're trying to put in. If you don't want to use Rena specifically, we can try to phrase it another way, but I really hate, there's something about that phrase I can't stand about, well, we want to be good people, but we don't want to do it here. Like, to me, it just doesn't, it rubs me the wrong way.
Okay,
And
I'm
I think
okay with that.
Can the audience see what I typed into Notepad in front of what you're looking at, the PDF, or do I have to reshare? Reshare. Okay, so what I did here was I believe I did this right. I took the first sentence from Kimberly's and added it to the bulk of the paragraph that Anne had written, okay? And it might be a little small.
I think Anne has
I
a
don't know.
point, and I'm happy to, you know, throw out that sentence. What do other
Okay,
council
so
members think?
All right,
Okay.
so that goes back to then what I typed into the chat. That was basically Anne's paragraph says, however, we recognize the California Arena and County imperatives, blah, 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 blah. And that, what I typed into the chat would then be the paragraph instead of this paragraph. Is that what I'm hearing? We get rid of this paragraph. All right, and I am happy to be edited and improved by Kimberly. So I am happy with the rest of her version of the letter, substituting Anne's key paragraph. And so I would entertain a motion to amend the letter with that change, subject to council discussion. We would need somebody to make that motion.
So moved.
I guess I will. Okay, you moved it. I'll second myself. And now we'll go around and see if people have a problem with what we're saying. So we'll start with Dan.
Yes. Well, are we voting or?
We made a motion. I was holding discussion, and then we'll
Okay.
call for a vote, but
Okay.
you would support it?
Yeah, support it.
Scott,
Yeah, I support it.
Gus,
Yeah, I support it.
Ann,
Yes, I do support it. And thank you. for
Kimberly
your-
can't vote. Claire, do you have a comment?
I support it.
All right, so let's call for a vote, Scott, and then just wrap up the transmission of the letter.
Okay.
We've amended the letter. We have amended the letter. That's what we're voting on. We're voting to amend the letter as discussed.
Okay, Dan?
Yes.
Let me guess. Gus?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes,
Claire?
Yes.
And that's it, right? That's everybody. So it's
yeah,
6 to
that's it.
6-0.
6-0 on that vote, but we know Kimberly likes it.
Yes.
Okay, so the next question is, I was suggesting that we vote to approve transmittal of the letter and report. It's in the chat. I don't know how I can do this easily. Let me open up a new document. Sorry. I'll open up a new document. I'll paste in what I think the vote is. Let me make it bigger. Share my screen. All right, council votes to approve the letter of transmittal as amended. And to authorize the ad hoc group of Greg and Ann to complete the final format of the report. We haven't had any changes. Do we have changes? Yes, we've had changes to discuss the visitor access. what else did we discuss? Burnett wanted to discuss moving the questions in front of the discussion. Frankly, I like it the way it is because we discuss things and then we ask the question. It is in fact a little bit rote, but I don't want people wondering why we're asking the question. I think it'd be more than copying and pasting to do that. And so while I took a lot of Burnett's advice in following the rubric he gave us, I would prefer to leave it the way it is. Well, does anybody else want to talk to that?
I agree.
The only thought is that, you know, if they don't read the whole thing, they may miss the most important part.
Well, that's the point. In order to read the questions, they have to have read the important part.
And they have to answer our questions, so this forces them to read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
What else?
I actually thought it was good advice, but I don't feel so strongly. We don't have much time left to get this thing done. So like in the interest of efficiency, it's probably best.
Okay,
But
wait
I
a minute.
think
We
it was
also have
actually
the
good
dark
advice.
sky. And reference dark skies international.
Dark Sky International.
Okay. Okay, that was your comment, Dan.
Yes.
Greg, I had my hand up about Burnett's suggestion. Can I speak?
Sid, we closed public comment. We closed public comment. Okay.
Okay. Shall I just log out? I
Um,
mean, you're done. You're just going to do editing from here on out?
You could send us a chat, but I
Well, I
think we're
did.
close to.
I suggested that you put the question, his question. He suggested that you put the question before the discussion. And if you're not going to do that, could you just put the question in bold type?
Oh, certainly. We were going to do that
Okay.
anyway, although we had.
All right.
We,
All right.
we were going to do.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So the changes are to add the visitor access problems, the restrictions that Carl mentioned, reference to Dark Sky International, and then a bunch of cleanup up here. And then Claire is going to audit it. So
Just quickly, visitor access doesn't really capture what Carl said, actually. He said coastal access, and that's the term you should use.
thank you. Okay. So that would be my nomination for what we now take a vote on. Does anybody have a problem with that? Okay, so no, actually, Sid, to your point, since we're about to take a vote on a motion, we do have to open it up for public comment. So did you want to make a public comment now, Sid?
Okay, I do. Thank you for letting me. I haven't read the whole thing because I was in a dental chair from 1 o'clock till 5:30 today, but I think if you either in the letter or because you took out the part about we support affordable housing, if you wanted to put in a plug for senior housing, many people are in favor of that location being seniors since it wouldn't involve commute time, but you may have already covered that in some other part. I just wanted to say
We
that.
do have that. We do have that in the report.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
Burnett, you raised your hand.
Yeah, just there was one other item. You talked about Gus clarifying one sentence in transportation in your Zoom comments, in your Zoom chat.
Yeah, I view that as a minor, it's not going to change the content. It's a minor typo formatting thing. Okay.
Yeah,
But
long
I
as
can
you-
add
I just wanted to make sure you covered it, that's all.
correct typos, etc. Okay, good. Thank you. I don't see any other comments. Am I missing something here? All right. So I would like a motion.
Greg, this is Barbara Matthewson.
Go ahead, Barbara. Barbara?
I'm just wondering why yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, sorry. I just have a real quick question. Why are you using Dark Sky International instead of the Illuminating Engineering Society, since they set the standards?
They work, well, they work together. They both came together and created the 5 principles. That's,
But it's actually, they're the ones that set the standards.
well,
I just think that's who you should be holding them to, not the Dark Sky.
yeah, I think Dark Sky International is the advocate, and the Illuminating Engineering Society is the industry. So
No, I think it's the other way around, but it's okay. All right, just my comment.
So, so that was an interesting comment that she just made. If we look at the document,
yeah,
it
both
says
names.
develop. Can you see it?
Yeah, look at the actual PDF.
It says developed jointly by the Dark Sky, we're going to say Dark Sky International and the Illuminating Engineers Society. So it mentions them both.
Yes, they came together and they created this document. Yes.
I think we've got it covered, Barbara. That's my take on it. Where was I? So I am ready to entertain somebody making a motion that reads, the council votes to approve the letter of transmittal for Cypress Point DEIR response as amended and to authorize the ad hoc group of Greg and Ann to complete the final formatting of the report, e.g. table of contents, cover page, captions on images, consistency of numbering, correct typos, etc., and to add the coastal access problems and reference Dark Sky International formally as requested by the council tonight, subject to an audit by Claire before release. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Ready to vote? All right, Dan.
Do we have any further discussion? I think we discussed it. I don't see any hands, so I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, Dan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Gus?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And Claire?
Yes.
Okay.
Greg, I didn't get all that in minutes. I didn't get
Oh
that.
my God, you're gonna have to watch the entire recording all over again to figure out what we did.
Can you text?
I couldn't write all that down, but that's
can you-
okay. I should
You
take
could
a
take a
picture of it.
picture. Just
I should take a
picture.
picture of it.
Can you
All right.
text them? the
Scott, you already have an email from me with the exact text that we just voted on that I typed on the screen.
Okay, all right,
Okay, when
thank
you
you.
get home, you will see the email.
I just
And-
got a
and
little
by-
dizzy there trying to deal with it, so.
By the way, we're still waiting for those May 17th minutes that Linda Ketchum was asking about.
I couldn't hear that. Well, can you? But I think your
right.
connection is something.
It's breaking up.
All right, so I believe we have closed the discussion here. And I will have to fix the letter. And now we're on to the next agenda topic, which is going to be changed in emphasis. But I did want to hear on the Montera Mountain North Peak Access Road maintenance issues, where we stood. And so I would ask Kimberly and or Scott to speak to the status of where we are and where we will go next on this.
Do you want me to just show you the slides we have already? You want me to just go through that?
No,
That's up to you and Kimberly. You guys are the
Okay.
work group.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Scott. There's too many corrections to I think it would cause more confusion than it would help because
Okay.
there are several things to be corrected.
Can you
Okay.
discuss some of what needs to be corrected and stuff?
So here's where we are. Scott drafted some slides and I contacted several of the agencies. And I drafted a kind of a report and a letter. And then the agencies, I kept calling them and didn't get any responses. Well, now they've started to respond. And so I've also learned some more information. And so that meant that the letter I drafted is no longer useful because it assumes some things that, now I'm updated on. So it's back to the drawing board with the letter. The report basically also needs some change. And what I've tried to focus in on, and what Scott also, he focused in on in his slides, is that there are, well, there's a few things. I'm sorry. I've been really in a lot of pain the last 2 days, so I'm not thinking very clearly, but we wanted to focus on the fact that the grading on the road went to an extreme in terms of removing vegetation, and actually has created in some spots more potential for erosion. Also the issue of habitat damage, impacts to any endangered or rare species, and then impacts to the scenic and recreational character of the road, which is used as a trail for visitors to the park, emphasizing that it is a park. That said, I also researched and talked with some folks from California State Parks to determine, because the documents that Dave Barnett sent us originally did not say who was going to be on site. It said who should be on site, but it didn't give us the information of what actually occurred. And so I now have a more complete picture of that. And it turns out that state parks did have resource advocates on site, as well as county parks. County parks was the biggest participator in this. I don't think GGNRA had anyone on site, but that's still uncertain. The other thing is that PG&E, the equipment they used was PG&E, so presumably PG&E operated that equipment. Although PG&E is not part of the project plan implementation. So there's still a lot of unknowns. Ultimately, when I have the next conversation with state parks, I've asked them if they will give us a presentation. The soonest, of course, would be October 11th, or our next meeting, October 25th, and have them explain their role, what they see, as problems with the maintenance, if any, and how they see maintenance in the future going forward, what their relationship is with the stakeholders, how they think that can be improved, and basically what they would recommend, so that we have some sense of where they stand as the largest stakeholder in the parcels. The other stakeholders only have very small pieces of the road. So American Tower Company has a 1/4 mile. SFPUC has a 1/4 mile, and GGNRA has even less. I think they overlap the road in 2 sections, probably around 500 to 700 feet. So I feel, and I think Scott and I agreed, that state parks is really the stakeholder that we need more feedback and input from, and that we need to make a request of. And to do that, we felt that we needed to hear from them first, in order to, respond to what their thinking is. The county, though, is the perpetrator of all of this. And any request for mitigation, especially with mitigation to potential erosion in the rainy season coming up, presumably would be orchestrated by the county in the same way that they orchestrated this. And it is very clear from the documents, which I presume none of us read as closely as we should have, that this was solely about money. So it was an emergency because that's the only way they could get funds to fund the work in such a short period of time.
That for the record, that was not what I was told. When I
It's
was
very
presented
clear
with
in the
this-
documents. If you go back and read the documents that Mr. Barnett sent to us, you'll see a summary, and throughout the summary, all the way through the options that were given that they supposedly considered, right up to the conclusion, it emphasizes over and over that there's only one way that they can get funds to cover the amount of work and maintenance needed, and that was the emergency option. And that's the option they chose. So that's essentially it.
Well, I remember the call quite clearly because of where I was when I took the call. And the
mhm.
guy said, what's his name? Barnett,
David
project
Barnett.
manager. Yeah. He said, Don Matei told me to treat this as though Montero Mountain Peak is on fire. We need to get access because we can't deliver emergency fuel for backup generators. And if we don't do that and the power goes out, we could lose telecommunications on the Midcoast. I mean, that's not an exact quote, but that's pretty damn close.
And that is what he said, and that is what you said in your email, but that's not what drove this forward. It was at this particular time that there were funds that they could access for 22-23 to do the work. And that's the only reason it was declared an emergency situation.
Well, that's a heck of a 60 minutes kind of disclosure, you know.
I mean, if you go back to the summary that he sent us, and I can recirculate this to the council, but it should be still in your inbox. The summary document says this over and over. And
all right, well, I'm not going to disagree with you. Okay, thank you for that.
It does, and it gives 4 options that they considered for how they would accomplish this maintenance, none of which were declaring it an emergency. And option 4 is the option they chose for that reason. It's the second to the last page, and it basically says right up front, request for mission tasking to Cal OES justified by emergency threat to critical radio infrastructure for assistance to manage, supervise, and complete work, as well as handle financial tracking, cost apportionment, and recovery. And further down, it basically says, if funded by Cal OES mission tasking, financial impact is minimized depending on level. And amount of recovered funds would depend on finding of damage occurred in March as opposed to previous storms. So they had to create a case for why the road was damaged during the storms in order to access that money.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so Kimberly, Scott, where do you guys want to go with this now? Just repeat. I know you wanted to hear from Agency X. What do you want to produce as deliverables? What do you want on the agenda when?
Here's what I'd like to do. I think this is a 2-part agenda item. I know that next week's agenda is full. If we could squeeze out 10 to 15 minutes, Scott and I could show you the slides and just give you a quick, summary of it all, visually, and outline some key questions, with sort of a brief report in writing. And then if California State Parks agrees to give us a presentation, then we would have them do that on October 11th or October 25th, in which they would have the opportunity to address a lot of questions from the community and from us. And then from there, we could decide what we want to pursue going forward.
Okay, so we don't do anything these days without using the Kimberly Williams Memorial Agenda Tracker. So here we have.
If you look at the meeting schedule tab, it's a little easier to see.
Well, I was just going to write this in 9/27/23 10 minutes and we'll clear this up later. And then you're
I actually
suggesting,
updated this already, but you don't have the updated version.
oh, I guess
Oh,
I do. It's
oh, you
right
do.
underneath it. Cal State Parks presentation. All right, so do I need to
Got
take
it.
that edit out or leave that in?
Oh, no, that's fine. So if you go to the bottom, it says meeting schedule. There. So that's where you might want to write it in. That lists all your topics for that particular meeting.
So this is manually duplicated, right? You have to retype this every time you make a change in the other spreadsheet.
Yes.
So herbicide is not going to be on September 27th. Is that my understanding from Gus?
Yes, so not on the 27th, right? Because I thought we didn't have space for it. That was my understanding.
All right. So let me just remove that. Do you have an idea? Are we putting it on?
Before you remove it, was that topic discussed with the,
Melissa and I had a long conversation about it the other night.
okay.
What date do you want me to plop it down on, and so we can tell them and commit to it?
Either one in October, I guess. So we've got the transportation thing on the 11th, right? Like, so
yeah.
So
all right, so I put it down for October 25th. Now let's go back to this.
I don't want to mix issues here, but I do want to raise that the whole point was to have it before the presentations by county parks and RCD.
Yes.
Is that
which is on
after
November
RCD
1st.
and county parks
Yes,
presentations?
Yeah, it's November 1st.
That's November 1st. Did you hear us, Kimberly?
I think that's a problem. They will have a problem with that.
No, we talked about it the other night.
Well, wait a minute. The RCD presentation is on November 1st.
It's not what
Let's
I heard from. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't see November 1st.
It's not our meeting. It's a meeting being held by RCD on November 1st. It's listed in the agenda on future agenda items, but it's not specifically an MCC meeting. So that's why it's not on this schedule, but it's on the, all right, so I'm going to stop sharing this. Where are we now? Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. Here's the future agendas list on this agenda. And I have parks herbicide use 11-1 meeting at RCD. So that's what I know. You don't agree, Kimberly? You think I'm wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I just, what is the parks herbicide use that says TBD?
To be determined at the MCC, and that's what we were discussing, whether we hold it on October, was it the 13th or the 27th?
Oh, I see. That's not county parks that you're talking about.
County parks would not be holding that meeting. We would be. Melinda and Jane and whoever else is going to be present. But I believe the thing that they're presenting is Parks's use of the herbicide, right?
They want to present alternatives to it. Yeah.
All right, so we'll retitle the agenda item. Maybe it should be titled something about better herbicide approaches.
Yeah, alternatives to glyphosate or whatever the name of the chemical is.
Glyphosate, right? Okay, so we'll retitle that agenda item as soon as you tell me what to retitle it. But
Right.
that would be on October 27th, if I remember correctly, what we just did.
25th.
25th? Okay, 25th. All right. So
Can
now we
everyone
got off
please,
the-
will you please mute yourself? There's some feedback coming into the meeting.
All
If
right.
you're not
So we
speaking,
got off the track. We were on the Montera Mountain, and it looks like Kimberly would be happy to give you the 10 or 15 minutes on September 27th.
Okay.
Did we want to discuss anything else about the Montera Mountain situation before we close that agenda item?
Do people have questions?
It looks like it. Would you like to recognize them?
Sure.
So Sid Young,
Thank you. Kimberly, I just wanted to let you know that Don Matei is officially already retired, but he's handing over the baton. He's temporary right now, but they've hired a new person in charge of DE, whatever they call themselves now. Used to be OES. And so if you want to, get on him about why he used the emergency thing, you should hurry because he is leaving for sure. The new person starts October 1st. I just wanted to throw that in there for you. You definitely have your hands full because the county does what the county wants to do, and it sounds like they cut corners to do it. Thanks.
Thank you,
Fran
Sid.
Pollard.
I think it's
Hi, I was gonna suggest, I was gonna suggest that I want to comment on the off-leash dog situation. And I don't think I'm gonna be ready for it next week, so that'll leave you some time, unless there's an urgency. Is the county hearing that in the near future?
Yes.
My understanding is there is a hearing at county planning sometime after September 27th, and that's why we're discussing it when we are, to prepare our letter or position statement before it's heard by county planning. Who is leading that agenda topic? Do we know?
The planning commission is hearing it?
Yeah, that's what I understand. I will get more information for you, Fran. I'll be happy to publish what I know.
Yeah, what I really want to do a presentation with pictures, and I'm having difficulty. I need help with that. So I don't know. That's why I'm not sure I can be ready next week unless somebody can help me put it
You
together.
got Burnett. Burnett is whiz with a PC and pictures. Just talk to him.
Okay. Are you on, Burnett?
No, we'll assign it to him because he's not here. That's the way you do things.
All right.
Fran, I
Thank
might be
you.
able to help you take pictures.
Who said that?
Did.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, so this is a poorly run meeting. We were discussing Montera Mountain. I think we closed Montera Mountain. Let me just check on the agenda.
It's Carl
Check on the
Young
agenda
would
here.
like to speak. Carl May would like to speak.
Carl May would like to speak on the issue of Montera Mountain.
Yes.
Okay, Carl.
I had planned to come here tonight with a stack of papers to back up some of the things that I want to be in this report. I'm very pleased that Kimberly and Scott have, through their own contacts, seen through the emergency declaration scam. And I think that's a point that needs to be nailed down by the facts that Kimberly is pointing out. This was a money grab for some money that was made available because of the storms last winter. This road project was planned as much as a year earlier, at which time an extensive botanical report was done that ignored all the other botanical reports. So much of this stack that I was going to bring here tonight are for covering extensive botanical surveys that have been done on this mountain over the last 30 years in detail. And these had an impact when Chet Bardo was head of our local state parks, and Chet lived right out at McMee. for a number of years, he and his wife raised a daughter there and so forth. And if it was Chet Bardo that was still there, he would have been all over this thing. The current state and county parks people who were supposedly overseeing this, and now I'm finding out that Kimberly has done the digging, or Scott has done the digging to find out that they were actually there. It's stunning, the incompetence and the lack of preparation on their part for what was done. It's just stunning for these extensive reports. And people may say, oh, you know, these people are a bunch of little wildflower lovers or whatever. The ecosystem is best approached through the vegetation in a place. The vegetation represents the biodiversity. There are many, many more species of animals out there, from tiny little mites you almost can't see, up into big raptors, deer, what have you. Many more species of them than plants by a long shot. And if you get into microorganisms and fungi, many, many thousands more of them. But the plants give you a grasp on what's there, and to have ignored all the past records of what existed on the vegetation there, and the past mistakes that were made with the vegetation, the past corrections that were insisted upon with PG&E and others who damaged the vegetation at other times in the past, to have ignored all of that is just mind-blowing. This is just incompetence on environmental matters. The one thing you have to do with an EIR is discuss alternatives. By getting through an emergency declaration that got around doing an EIR, they weren't required to consider any alternatives to this. There are a number of large tanks of gas up there right now, providing energy for the towers. You know, what's going to be in aren't they kept topped up and prepared? Where was the discussion of that? Maybe they need energy for towers that aren't already up there. Well, why don't they get them up there and keep them topped up in advance for these things? When PG&E comes in and replaces poles, the large poles on towers that go all the way down the ridge of Montera Mountain, these are enormous multi-ton metal poles that they've been putting in place of the wooden poles. Do you think they are trucked up there? No, they are taken in by helicopter. And helicopters, what's wrong with bringing in a little emergency supply of fuel by helicopter if it's such an emergency? That's no big deal. So there's on and on in the considerations of this. They're just infuriating. The good that could come out of this would be if we can somehow force into these people who are handling our mountain, our most natural area around here, if we can force them into some institutional knowledge and into some policy changes that will prevent this kind of ignorance from prevailing on these things in the future, instead of having to keep going through this over and over again. So that's, I think Kimberly and Scott are thinking about along the lines of, can we really have an effect with this? And that would be the best thing that could happen, is if we could actually affect these agencies to wake up and implant some new procedures and policies for places like Montera Mountain and other places, maybe, in their park systems. Some good, real good could come out of this if we could use this as a case study for some changes that need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. Is nobody in the audience there wanted to speak? Oh, Kimberly, raise your hand.
I just want to raise one other thing that we're going to bring up, and that is the CRISP initiative, which calls for redundancy. One of the things mentioned over and over in Mr. Barnett's materials is that the county is completely dependent on those towers for communications. And I think that that one thing there is part of the problem, in that there is no redundancy, there's no backup if those towers fail. At least that's what they want us to believe. And so we need to push this in that CRISP initiative, that redundancy is really important, and maybe it's time to do some long-term planning for another form of, or another conduit for communication, as opposed to having those towers on the top of the mountain. So for what it's worth, that's another component. And that's all I've got.
That was plenty. So the next agenda item is a special meeting.
One more quick comment. That's just another of the things that show how railroaded this thing was. Have you ever heard of Starlink? They're using it in war areas right now as a backup communication system. What's wrong with using Starlink? There are many others possible, satellite communication and so forth, that could be backup. So we're in no way completely dependent on one set of towers on top of one mountain. By the way, there's another end of Montera Mountain that also has had communication facilities on it. For Western Union, the FAA for San Francisco Airport works out of there, and so forth. It's called Scarper Peak. So it's just another indication of how incompetent this particular project was. Thank you.
Carl, we thank you for your comments, and I look forward to you running for office for the MCC in 2024. Sid Young, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I wanted to thank Carl for his great comments, and also say that the MWSD has offered to let CAL FIRE put their fire cam up on the Montera tank at Alta Vista, and the road is pretty well paved up there, but they chose to go higher up the mountain, and half the time, if you look at that CAL FIRE camera, it's in fog. So I think, they could move those towers if they really were so worried about them. But I think you should contact Clements about this, Kimberly, if you get a chance, because he has some input on this too. It's been brought up at the MWSD as well. Thank you.
All right. With that, I'm closing public comment and ending this agenda item. Our next item was to discuss future agendas. I believe we already have done that. Does the council wish to discuss any more about future agendas? I hear none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Let's do it. Yeah, I
All right,
move.
any objection? Any objection?
Greg,
Hearing
can I
none.
quickly wait, Greg? If you're going to email me that document, be sure to let me know, text me if it's coming, or else I'll come get it on a thumb drive when it's ready to be printed.
Okay, I will let you know,
Thanks.
Sid.
Okay,
put a
don't
note
just
on my
email it, because I might not see it. Thanks.
Got it.
Bye.
Right. Thank you all. Thank you all for your time. I'm most grateful to the residents for their participation in our activities.
Recording stopped.